Hello and welcome to Public Report. I'm Patty Hutton, your host. Today, our guest will be Dave Risch, the principal of the Heartland South and Heartland Community Learning Charter School. Our issue will be education in schools with the topic of community learning charter schools. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dave.
Thank you for having me.
Please tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your role as principal of the Heartland South and Heartland Community Learning Charter School.
Okay. I've been a principal for 10 years, and I initially started out with just Heartland South Elementary School, and in the last 2 years we've opened up the Heartland School of Community Learning, which is a charter school on our campus.
Could you tell us a brief overview of the charter school in the district and what that looks like, what its mission is?
Certainly. The mission of our charter school is for students to become the architects and advocates for their own learning. And I'll try and kind of build some understanding around what that actually means. If you go back about 4 years ago, there were 2 or 3 key people involved in the discussion and design of a new school. And it wasn't because our current school had, chronic areas that needed improvement. It was that when we looked into our classrooms, we knew there were children who weren't as successful as we wanted them to be. They might be bored. They might have trouble sitting still. They might not be interested or engaged in the information and learning that was intended to be acquired. We also thought that there were kids who possibly were struggling because they could have been challenged more. So when we looked at that model closely, we said it really wasn't meeting the needs of all our students. Our teachers were working incredibly hard to achieve all those things, but I think it was the overall model that needed to be looked at. Kind of when you look at the design of school and education, most of the educational environments that we went through were based on the factory model. 25 kids in the same room, sharing the same curriculum. The teacher has the leadership role of basically telling us that information. And that's the system that we grew up on. Mm-hmm. And however, unfortunately, the world and the job place and everything else is changing at a dramatic rate. And schools, partially because of funding, have trouble keeping up with those changes. And we can try and modify small changes here and there, but to make a big systemic change is difficult. So what we thought was, if we changed the environment that our students learn in, we make it more reflective of the world that they're going to participate in, that they're going to eventually have jobs in. And we look at some really important things that are built into the 21st century learning model of collaboration and communication and inquiry and ownership and having students take that initiative to be a participant and actually drive a lot of their own learning. But the charter school system also creates a high accountability bar and pushes us to maintain, a high level of rigor, the state standards and the core standards for student achievement. So while we've given kids a lot of flexibility in how they learn and what they learn, mm-hmm. and also some more participation, we really have to stay accountable to prove that they are being successful in that academic sense.
As far as the traditional learning methods, do they work for all students, or what do you see the need being for the alternative methods?
Well, I think the big shift is if our students have a larger voice in what they're learning and how they're learning it. So when we look at education, it's how much of the time is spent on the teacher asking questions and how much of it is spent on the student asking those questions. So by raising the level of engagement and opportunity, the kids are actually higher participants rather than waiting to be a participant. So if you came to our school and actually saw it in action, which is obviously pretty different, the kids have shared projects. They work together in collaborative teams. They set individualized goals. They conference with the teacher on a daily basis. The teacher still leads and models and mentors instruction, but the students have a lot more ownership and buy-in to the content and how they acquire that learning. So if you think back to our mission about being an architect and advocate, our goal is when a child leaves our school, they know themselves as a learner. They know that they're a visual learner, they're an auditory learner. They need to do it with their hands. They need to build it in order to really understand, or they need to teach someone else how to demonstrate that understanding. The unique thing about that is paper and pencil and academic tests don't allow for it. And the typical classroom design doesn't really foster it. When you put 25 desks into a classroom, you're kind of confined, and you've got that paradigm of what school was like when we were there. So by changing the environment, getting experts and allowing for some flexibility, we're really reshaping what education looks like for those students.
Are you finding a higher level of learning in the students based on the hands-on experience that they're engaged more, as opposed to being less active in the learning?
Definitely. We have more students not only taking that ownership and that enthusiasm to a high academic level, but we also see a decrease in behavior and an increase in the respect and responsibility that kids have for one another. Because in our multi-age environment with 3rd through 5th graders, we have 5th graders who see the value of a 3rd grader contributing to a project and being a participant in class, and vice versa, 3rd graders who work with 4th graders, etc. But they don't even see each other as different ages and grades, which is more reflective of the way we are in our community. We certainly don't have neighbors that are the exact same age, nor do we work with people who have the exact same age.
So you're integrating all the different ages in the classroom.
We are, and when you talk about instruction changing, those teachers truly take on a facilitation role where they facilitate that learning for the child rather than the direct instruction model by telling them this is what we're going to learn and this is how we're going to learn it. They have to cultivate and know their students so well that they can then integrate and design that learning with the child.
Are you finding that this kind of a model benefits students of all different learning capabilities, whether you're more of an audio or a visual learner?
Yes, I definitely would say that. We have a wide range of students in our charter school environment, kids with all different kinds of needs, strengths, and learning styles. And parents really like that. They think that they've got a choice and they've got a place that they think fits their student. And that's our goal, is to really kind of customize that. Now, the unique thing about our charter school environment is that we've also got a community connection, because just like in a classroom environment, we don't expect kids to only learn in that space. They can learn outside, they can learn downtown, they can learn at the bank, they can learn from a guest. So depending on the opportunity, they can physically be engaged in that learning model almost anywhere.
Now, would this model benefit all students, or are there some students that still benefit from more of your traditional type school?
I believe that it would definitely fit for any student. But again, it comes back to parent choice. That's the beauty of the system, is that if a parent thinks this is a good fit for their child, it can be a good fit. I have some families who say this is a great fit for my son, but my daughter, it needs to be in a different environment. But again, and some of that is reflective of what their confidence is and their personal experience, because many parents think that if they were successful, that the system was really fine.
How do teachers work differently with each of the different students and their different needs and processes that they're bringing?
Well, that's a great question, because we've often pushed teachers to be multidimensional, basically superheroes, and that they took that personal ownership of those 25 children and said, I'm really struggling with this one or that one. And yet, they may not have the skill set to meet all those needs. And it's not because they don't try to acquire it, but imagine being a doctor who suddenly has to be a master of all trades, rather than bringing a physician's team together to look at how do we best support the patient. So we designed our model to look more like a facilitation team. We've got 2 classroom teachers, we've got integrated special education teachers that are dual certified in regular and special education certification. We have guidance counselors involved, we've had technology design incorporated, and we've utilized certified teachers who don't have full-time jobs but work with us as what we call a learning assistant in a 5-hour-a-day capacity. So the combined power of that team, we have about 5 consistent people on that team that are there to meet the needs of 50 students. Doesn't mean we have 5 teachers in that 50 ratio, but if we have a student who is struggling or needs to be extended in a different direction, rather than having one teacher try and design all that learning. The goal is to have the team say, okay, how can we support that child and what does he or she need to be successful?
So there's many voices that are giving the input to that child's learning process and direction.
Exactly.
So now that you have that plan in place, how are those techniques implemented in the classroom as far as teaching the child in the different learning styles?
Well, there's a lot of flex grouping that goes on, and there's a lot of conferencing that goes on. And when I say conferencing, it means that that child and that teacher have daily conversations about what they're learning and how they're demonstrating that learning, and they actually set personal goals. So a child looks at their strengths and weaknesses, works with the teacher on a weekly basis to establish a learning goal in reading, establish a learning goal in writing, and then they work progressively toward that goal. Now the teacher may say, this strategy is working, that strategy is not working. Let's talk to another teacher about a strategy that could support it. And that's where the instructional design takes place, because it's really individualizing for that child depending on what's successful and what's not successful. Another example is you might have a student who works very, very well by themselves. They learn and comprehend everything in text format, and they can duplicate that information and share that information, but they're not as confident working with groups, or they can't take that information and create and redesign something else based on it. So there's a lot of different skills that need to be kind of pulled together to really build an independent, successful student.
And it sounds like as much as it makes them work within their strengths, as for the example of the student not working as much with his peers, it might also create opportunities to push him a little bit to strive to obtain that knowledge.
Yeah, and building on that enthusiasm. While we push the student, we also want them to see the value of working with others. We want others to see the value of their expertise. And the goal is to build that independence, but yet that confidence, and to see the creation of new ideas and new learning opportunities. The surprising thing is, sometimes you can plan very well, thinking you know exactly where the children are headed, and then something occurs when they come together that takes you in a completely different direction. But it's because of their enthusiasm and something that you never anticipated would come out of that experience.
Do you believe that this model has been very successful for your district and would like to see it expand?
I do. Part of the goal for a charter school is kind of like research and design. It's to take a concept that you believe has quality and build it at a scale, and then if it's successful, it should fund itself and transfer into the district. So even after year one, we saw some of the techniques and pieces of our charter school having an impact on the rest of our school. And from year one into year two, we have had lots of other school districts come and visit. We've had undergrad students come and visit. We have grad students coming to visit. And the school is fairly busy with other people kind of taking a look at how we did it and what we did.
Thank you so much for joining us today and helping us learn more about charter schools.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
This has been Public Report. I'm Patty Hutton, your host. Our guest today has been Dave Risch, the principal of the Heartland South and Heartland Community Charter School. The issue has been education in schools with the topic of community learning charter schools.